Chapter 2. Though I've set him free, I still don't know whether he'll give his daughter to me or not. But his meditation was interrupted by a gate officer, who knelt before him and said, "While on duty at the palace gate, I discovered a quatrain written by Su Hu, in which he announces a rebellion. Not daring to keep it to myself, I'm reporting this to your majesty." Reading over the explosive poem, King Zhou once more became infuriated. How dare that bloody bastard act like this? As heaven prefers not to kill, I didn't cut his damned head off but set him free instead. This is the way he shows his gratitude. This time he must be punished. He cursed and gave the order. Generals Yin, Chao and Lu are hereby ordered to lead 6 armies under my command to attack Jizhou. Our goal is the utter decimation of the city. Hearing this order, General Lu Xiong thought, Su Hu is a good and faithful minister, but how did he offend the king so much that his majesty himself is going to Jizhou? Woe to the city! Feeling a pang of compassion for Su Hu, he knelt down and reported, "Though Su Hu was offensive in your majesty's presence, it's unnecessary for you to venture personally to the front. Since the Grand Dukes are still in the capital, your majesty may appoint 1 or 2 of them to command the attack. You shouldn't place yourself in danger on the front. Who would be the best qualified to act on my behalf? Since Jizhou's in the north, under the administration of the North Grand Duke, your majesty may logically appoint Cheng Hohu." Fei Zhang said. This was quickly approved by the king. Cheng Hohu's avaricious and cruel. Wherever his army goes, people suffer terribly. General Lu Xiong thought. But the West Grand Duke Ji Chang is virtuous, loved and well trusted by the people. Better I recommend him to prevent things from getting worse. The king was ordering to publish the appointment when he objected. Though Cheng Hohu is the North Grand Duke, he's not fully trusted by the people, and it may be difficult for him to accomplish his mission. However, Ji Chang has long been known for his virtue. I recommend that you appoint him to take your place. This way, Su Hu will be punished according to law, without your having to confront the danger of arrows and spears. After a long hesitation, King Zhou approved both recommendations, and appointed Cheng Hohu and Ji Chang in joint command of the army. When the announcement reached him, Ji Chang remarked to the 2 prime ministers and the 3 other dukes at the banquet. Though Su Hu came to offer his allegiance, he wasn't admitted to the palace, nor was he received by his majesty. How could he possibly have offended the king? He's known to all for his loyalty and good conduct, and for his many outstanding military successes. There must have been a good reason for him to write the poem. His majesty'll lose sympathy from the marquises if he believes the malicious accusations by his minions and attacks Su Hu. Would you 2 prime ministers try to find out at court tomorrow morning what crime it is that Su Hu's committed? Should he be guilty, Su Hu must be punished. If not, we must do something about it. You're right, Grand Duke. Vice Prime Minister Bi Gan agreed. But Cheng Hohu held a different view. The king's words, if unspoken, are like silk threads, but turn into satin once he begins to speak. Who would dare to oppose an order he had already issued? Besides, Su Hu did indeed write an abusive poem, and his majesty hasn't made his decision groundlessly. Should the 800 marquises all begin to disobey the king, how can his majesty maintain order? Your point seems quite reasonable, yet it's only one-sided. No one doubts that Su Hu's a faithful minister. He serves the country with loyalty, educates the people methodically, and commands his army brilliantly. He's acted faultlessly for years now. Ji Chang refuted him. I'm at a loss as to who's tricked his majesty into punishing the innocent. This isn't an auspicious omen for the country. I pray that his majesty won't choose to use violence. War is a serious disaster. It wastes money, slaughters the people, and destroys the peace of the nation. You may be right, Grand Duke, but how can we disobey his majesty's orders? We're compelled to follow them, lest we commit the crime of opposing the king. Replied Cheng Hohu. If it be so, lead your army to the front first, and I'll follow you there soon. said Ji Chang. The banquet ended and the party went their separate ways. Before his departure, the West Grand Duke said to the prime ministers, "Cheng Hu will be there first. I have to return to West Qi for the time being, and will join him shortly." Arriving back at Jizhou, Su Hu was met in the suburbs by his eldest son Su Changzhong at the head of his generals. When he entered the city, he held a meeting and told his generals all that had happened to him in the capital. "We must train men and horses and make preparations to defend the city walls with catapults and rolling logs against the king's army," he warned them. All of his generals and soldiers took extra care while on guard and prepared themselves for the anticipated attack. Without the least delay, Cheng Hu gathered a 50,000-strong army and left the capital for Jizhou. He was well equipped with cannons powerful enough to shake the earth, and his troops with their spears and swords were imposing as huge mountains. After marching through countless cities and towns, a report came from the vanguard. The armies arrived at Jizhou and requests orders from the commander. He ordered the army to halt and encamp within stockades and strongholds. When he learned of the arrival of the invaders, Su Hu asked an intelligence officer, "Who's the commander of the army?" "It's Cheng Hu, the North Grand Duke." Su Hu was infuriated. "I'd settle this matter with a compromise if it were any other Grand Duke but Cheng Hu," he declared. "Cheng's an evil fellow, and it's absolutely hopeless to try to settle in peace with him. I'll take him by surprise, and ensure that people won't suffer any harm." Amid the firing of cannons, Su Hu led his generals and soldiers out of the city roaring like thunder. He lined up his men and shouted, "Let me talk with your commander now." Cheng Hu led his men out of the strongholds to meet the challenge. He rode on a tall stallion, wore golden chain mail, a red robe and a jade belt, and held a cutlass across his saddle. Behind him came his eldest son, Cheng Yingbiao, his generals, and two great banners, one embroidered with a dragon and the other with a phoenix. Seeing Cheng Hu in front of him, Su Hu bowed. "How are you, Grand Duke? I'm terribly sorry that I cannot offer you a complete salutation, as I'm in helmet and armor." He greeted him and then came to the point. "King Zhou has of late become corrupt and immoral as a ruler. He shows no respect for his ministers, cares little for the state, and listens only to the servile courtiers. He compelled me to give him my daughter as a concubine. Addicted to sex and wine, he now leads a life of dissipation. The kingdom will soon suffer from great disturbances and is bound to fall before long. But I've always stayed within my own marquisate, and I am surprised to see you here with your army." In anger, Cheng Hu said, "You disobeyed the orders of His Majesty and wrote a treasonable poem on the wall of the Meridian Gate. You're a rebel and ought to be punished by death. On the order of His Majesty, I'm here to carry out his sentence. You should have knelt down before my army in unconditional surrender, but you stand there in armor, brandishing your weapons and mouth glib rubbish." Turning towards his men, he demanded, "Who'll take that filthy bandit for me?" A general, wearing a phoenix feather helmet, a scarlet robe, and golden armor, urged forward his black stallion crying, "I'll take that bloody bastard." Galloping swiftly to the front, he was met by General Su Changzhong, Su Hu's eldest son, who, brandishing a halberd, shouted, "What's the big hurry? Come on, let's fight." He recognized his opponent as General Mei Wu. "Su Changzhong, you and your father are rebelling against His Majesty. Lay down your arms and surrender, or else your whole clan will die." Su Changzhong remained silent. Urging his horse forward, he stabbed at Mei Wu's chest with his halberd. Mei Wu resisted bravely and struck at him with his battle axe. Their combat proceeded vigorously. After 20 rounds, Mei Wu received a fatal wound and fell dead to the ground. Now that his son had won the first encounter, Su Hu ordered his men to beat the drums, signaling an all-round engagement. At this, Zhao Bing, Chen Jizhen, and the Jizhou soldiers launched into the enemy line. After a fierce battle, the field was soon piled high with the dead and wounded, and blood flowed freely over the wilderness under a gloomy sky. Cheng Hohu and his generals Jin Kui, Huang Yunji, and Chong Yingbiao were utterly defeated and retreated to a distance of 10 li, 1 li equals 0.3 mile. Returning, Su Hu held a meeting to discuss the future with his generals. Though we've defeated Cheng Hohu today, he'll come here again with a stronger force. Su Hu said, Jizhou's still in great danger. What shall we do now? Zhao Bing stepped forward and said, in my humble opinion, since we've taken the first step, we must take the second. Cheng's suffered defeat this time and retreated, though not too far from us. We might launch a surprise attack tonight and smash his stockades in the darkness. When we've routed him completely, Cheng'll come to realize that we're not to be trifled with. Only then can we hope to come to terms with a duke other than Cheng and save the city from destruction. What do you think, Marquis? Su Hu was overjoyed at this suggestion. You're quite right. I agree with you completely. He said, then issued orders. Su Changzhong with 3,000 men are to lay an ambush at Wugang, about 10 li beyond the west gate. General Chen Jizhen's to lead his army on the left and Zhao Bing on the right, while I'll be in the middle. After dusk, Su Hu's armies were ordered to march to their positions, flags rolled up, drums quiet and horses moving in silence. Soon they would take the enemy by surprise. Cheng Hohu had not expected such a defeat and the loss of his generals and soldiers. With nowhere to turn to, he gathered his troops and encamped anew. He addressed his men. Though I've fought countless battles in my day, never have I suffered such a defeat as today. The death of Mei Wu, in particular, is a great loss to us. What shall we do? General Huang Yunji consoled him. Don't you know, Grand Duke, that victories and defeats are routine business in the army? The West Grand Duke'll soon be with us, and we'll be able to smash Jizhou as easily as snapping our fingers. You shouldn't worry too much. At this, Cheng Hohu brightened up and drank with his generals in their new camp. Meanwhile, Su Hu led his army quietly out of the city and waited patiently for the moment to come. By the time of the first watch, the army had marched 10 li, and the enemy camp was in sight. At a prearranged signal, Su Hu's cavalry and infantry bravely launched their attack, taking Cheng completely by surprise. They rushed in like tigers and wolves, slaughtering and maiming on all sides. Su Hu was riding alone, lance in hand, in search of Cheng Hohu. Cheng was startled from his dreams by the battle cries. He dressed quickly, mounted his horse, grabbed his cutlass, and stormed away from his tent into the combat. Soon he came upon Su Hu, in a golden helmet and armor, mounted on a black horse and wielding a long fire dragon lance. Su Hu saw him. Cheng Hohu, how dare you flee so shamelessly? Get down from your horse and be my captive, he shouted. Cheng was greatly frightened, and had little choice but to match his cutlass against Su Hu's lance. At this moment, his son Chong Yingbiao, Jin Kui, and Huang Yunji came to his aid. But Zhao Bing and Chen Jizhen appeared moments later to right the temporary imbalance. The men on both sides battled furiously in the dark of night. Su Hu's troops were well prepared for the attack, while Cheng Hohu's men were taken by surprise. Thus, the soldiers of Jizhou fought with extraordinary bravery, and Cheng Hohu's men were totally overwhelmed. In the midst of the fight, Jin Kui was felled from his horse by Zhao Bing and died instantly. Realizing that the situation was not to be saved, Cheng Hohu was forced to beat a fighting retreat with Chong Yingbiao. They ran like homeless dogs, while the soldiers of Jizhou fought as bravely as tigers and fiercely as wolves. The ground was strewn with corpses, and blood flowed in streams. After pursuing the fleeing troops for 20 li, Su Hu gave the order that his men return to Jizhou. Fleeing, Cheng Hohu and Chong Yingbiao met Huang Yunji, Sun Ziyu, and their soldiers. Cheng Hohu groaned. Since I first became a soldier, I've never suffered such a big defeat as this. I never expected those treacherous bandits would attack our stockades in the middle of night and cost us officers and many soldiers. We must take our revenge. I'm also displeased that Ji Chang should rest peacefully in his dukedom, and ignore His Majesty's orders. He doesn't send us a single soldier, but sits back and watches me suffer a defeat. I won't tolerate this. We've lost our fighting spirit. Chong Yingbiao said, I suggest that we take a defensive position and take no further action for the present. Let's send a messenger to Jichang to request reinforcements. You're right, my son. Let's discuss this again at dawn, replied Chong Ho-hu. He was not aware that an ambush was prepared for them. As they rode, the sudden thunder of cannons rent the air, and they heard the Jizhou soldiers roaring. Chong Ho-hu, dismount from your horse and die. Looking up, Chong Ho-hu saw a brave young general in a golden helmet and armor, with a face round as the full moon and lips red as vermilion. On my father's orders, I've waited for you for a long time. Throw down your cutlass, get off your horse, and meet your death, cried Su Chongzhong. What are you waiting for? You bloody bastard! Both you and your father are wicked rebels, killing generals and soldiers sent here by His Majesty. Your crimes are weighty as mountains, and you deserve to be sliced into 1,000 pieces. It's too early for you to brag about victory, though I've suffered from your surprise raid. As soon as the reinforcements from His Majesty arrive, you and your father shall meet instant deaths. Chong Ho-hu reviled in return. Who'll take this rascal for me? General Huang Yongji spurred his horse forward and swung his cutlass at Su Chongzhong, who met the charge with his halberd. They fought an intense battle, with neither side taking the immediate upper hand. Then, Sung Ziyu galloped out with his forked spear to join the fight against Su. With a mighty roar, Su Chongzhong pierced Sung Ziyu's helmet with his weapon, bringing him crashing to the ground. Though the combat was joined by Chong Ho-hu and his son, Su Chongzhong fought on single-handedly against the three generals, displaying the courage of a tiger in the mountains or a dragon in the sea. Su Chongzhong's halberd slashed Chong Ho-hu's armor, knocking off a piece covering his thigh. Much alarmed, Chong spurred his horse and with a rapid leap fled the scene of combat. Seeing his father flee, Chong Yingbiao became discouraged and distracted. A thrust of Su's halberd at his heart caught him unawares, but hastily avoiding it, he took a heavy blow in the left arm. Blood soaked his robes and armor. He would have fallen from his horse had not his generals rushed forward to support him. Once again, Chong Ho-hu's army suffered a terrible defeat. Su Chongzhong dared not pursue any further in the darkness, and went back to the city. At dawn, Su Hu held a conference at court. He asked Su Chongzhong, "Have you captured that rogue? By your order, I had my men lay an ambush at Wugan, and the defeated enemy troops fell into the trap at midnight. I fought bravely and managed to stab Sun Ziyu to death, knock off Chong Ho-hu's armor, and pierce Chong Yingbiao's left arm. They were thoroughly defeated, but I dared not chase them farther in the dark. I had no choice but to return," Su Chongzhong reported. Chong Ho-hu was lucky. You may rest now, my son. Su Hu was very pleased with this outcome. If you wish to know what happened after that, please read the next chapter.